Captain's log. Captain's log. What did they say? Captain's log. October 3rd, 2019. Hey, it's Alice. I'm back with a market update for the Victoria real estate market. This one is for the end of September 2019. Yep, I've got the numbers, and I just wanted to talk about some things that have been going on since I last spoke to you guys. It's been an interesting couple of weeks, which I will get to. But anyways, I will give you the numbers for the Victoria real estate market, and I wish they were more interesting, but what can I do? It is what it is. So sales in the Victoria real estate market, we had 616 sales go through in September 2019 versus last year we had 533 sales that went through. So that's roughly 15% or 15.6% of an increase. So yeah, it was a bit busy for sales as far as September goes. Still nowhere near 2017 levels, but yeah, it's slowly creeping up there again for sales volume. So yeah, listings were about the same. Actually, it was 1,168 listings that came to market, whereas in 2018 it was like 1,165 listings. So that's almost identical. It's actually quite incredible how close it was. But yeah, lots of listings I'm finding in the mid-ranges. If you're looking for something really specific, it's a little bit tough. It's a little bit of a wait, unfortunately, but it is what it is. Active listings went up again. They were sitting at 2,823 active listings as of the end of September, whereas in 2018 there was 2,646 active listings at the end of September 2018. So that's an increase of 6.7%. So yeah, that number is always slowly creeping up. I'm sure I'm not shocking anybody, but it is slightly higher. The main thing that people seem to be watching these days is the price of the houses. So I have the average price of a single family dwelling in Greater Victoria, and then I also have the HPI for a Victoria Core home and for a Victoria Core condo. Again, the HPI amalgamates more details, but I do know that some people track the average home price. Personally, if I'm looking at it, I do see that the home price index is a little bit more of a smooth representation of where we're at, whereas the average price is they look a little bit more like stock market. I tend to prefer the average price just from my judgment. If I'm thinking of a house in, the core of Victoria, like the heart of Victoria, I do tend to find that the average price tends to be a little bit closer to what I'm seeing. But that's just my personal opinion. The real estate board and all those in power, they tend to prefer to use the HPI, and I'm sure that they have great reasons for that. But that's just my personal preference, is the average price. So anyways, the HPI for a Victoria Core single family dwelling is $846,500. Whereas last year that was $878,500. So that has come down. I think, I didn't write the percentage, I think roughly like 3%, maybe between 2 and 3. Anyways, it's slowly coming down. In one of my previous videos, I talked about how in 2018, watching the numbers, it was very, like the sales were dropping, and that was kind of what was more noticeable. But right now it's more, at least since January, the prices have slowly been creeping down, month over month, versus, the previous year's month. So that's what I'm noticing, is the numbers for the sales are not all that interesting. They're actually pretty strong, but it's just the price is not as bullish as it once was. So the HPI for benchmark condo in the core of Victoria for 2019 went up 1.6%. So it's at $511,600 versus last year it was $503,000 roughly. So $500,000 for a condo in downtown Victoria gets you a relatively new condo, most likely a 1 bed, 1 bath, maybe 1 bath and 2 beds if you're lucky, if it's a bit older, but that's like a newer build. Yeah, you're not buying a 1980s condo. Those you can still get for, in the 450, yeah. So anyways, $500,000 for a condo for the HPI of Victoria. Single family dwelling in Greater Victoria, average price for 2019 in September was $905,000. I'm looking at my paper, $905,964. So that is down from last year in September. The average single family Greater Victoria home price was $920,825. So yeah, down 1.6%, but in material terms, I mean, because the number is so high, it's actually a little decent kind of drop there. So those are the numbers for Victoria. I won't go into regional areas, but in general, that's kind of a snapshot of the downtown main activity core. West Shore home sales are actually picking up as well. They're quite strong. Housing sales in Victoria, they're not up quite as much. Like the percentage of sales that went through for 616 sales in September, a large majority of them were condos, or at least condos are really picking up. Like condos in September 2019 versus last year in September, the jump was like 48% more condo sales. So thinking about that, what it really tells me is that most people are looking at condos because they can't afford $900,000 houses. I mean, that's where my logic would take me. So anyways, that is what it is. I haven't been out actively buying. I'm in an in-between stage with most of my clients, so I'm not out every day, negotiating and stuff like that. Like my business is very, so I'm in the process of hunting for things or closing things, but I'm not out viewing 10 properties a day and getting into bidding wars. So I'm not experiencing whether or not people are still kind of trying to facilitate bidding wars that aren't really there. If you remember my previous video, I have no point of reference on that. Like I haven't been, so it could still be happening. I do know that if you're buying a house in the 600,000 to 700,000 range in Victoria, kind of centrally, you'll probably be fighting for that if it's a really nice home. So just, that's likely what you'd be looking at. Now, the election is coming up, as I'm sure everybody knows. What is it, October 21st, I think? Yeah, I just got my registration thing in the mail. So anyways, the BC housing sector, there's 6 organizations that are grouping together, and they are urging the next federal government to make some changes, because when they did a poll, not surprisingly, 6 out of 10 people were basically saying that housing affordability is one of their biggest concerns regarding who they vote for. So not surprising, it's still, even though the news or the sales or the prices are not dramatic, there's still quite a separation between people who have normal jobs being able to get in the market and those who are buying the $1 million houses, right? So there's still a lot of people that are being left out of the housing market and the joy of home ownership. And so a lot of people are, they're kind of in a pinch, and rent is incredibly expensive these days, so I can see why people are complaining about it. It's totally reasonable. So they are suggesting a few things to the next federal government. The biggest things that I noted in the press release, which I will link in the description, is that they want to remove GST being charged on purpose-built rental buildings. So say if a developer is building like a multi-unit apartment complex, if he's the one building it and he's building it as rentals to use for himself to own and rent out, once he starts renting it and the building stage is complete, he is charged GST on that sale. It's not really a sale, but he's charged GST. And so their reasoning is that because the developer is being charged this 5% GST on a likely multi-million-dollar property, that equates to a lot of dollars. So Their reasoning is if they create an exemption or a rebate for these developers to save on the GST, that the savings would be passed to the renters in the tune of 3 to 6% reductions in rent prices. I don't know. It might work, might not. I mean, I still think they'd probably be charging a market rent because they can, but maybe there's, you know, certain ways that they can get funding for their building from the government, wanting to help with affordable housing. So I don't know, that's just something that they are suggesting. Who knows if they'll do it? To me, I feel like it's reasonable to not charge a developer who's self-building his own rental properties, to not charge him GST, because he's technically not selling it to anybody, he's building it for himself. And so, you know, it is what it is. I know a lot of people don't like developers, but I also don't like over-taxation. And I feel like if there's no taxable event really happening there in, you know, in just my thought, then I don't know why they're charging him GST. I'm sure there's a great reason, but I kind of agree with that one. It also would encourage people who want to build rentals to perhaps take that on because there's less of a cost involved. So maybe the numbers would make better sense, right? So anyways, that's one of the main ones that they want to do. The other one is addressing the B20 stress test. So after speaking with a lot of mortgage brokers, just in Victoria, not in Vancouver or anything, but my general feeling from speaking with them is that yes, it is affecting a lot of young buyers. Many mortgage brokers want it gone because it is just cutting people off at the knees. So the big one that is stopping people from being able to buy, you know, setting aside the whole fact that they basically have to qualify for 2% above what they can actually get as an interest rate, the bringing back a 30-year amortization would be a great help. And when I was younger, that's how I got my mortgage, was because I was too young. I didn't have the income to support a 25-year amortization, but 30-year allowed me to get into the market, and here I am today in my gorgeous house, right? So, you know, I agree with that one. I think that that would be great. And also they want to make sure that the government would also be qualifying them at the contractual rate or the contractual period of amortization. So if they're actually on paper going for a mortgage that's 30 years of amortization, that they don't have to qualify for 25 years of amortization. So it's bringing back both sides of that, which I agree with. They also want to exclude the stress test from switches or transfers. Say if you're renewing a mortgage and you're shopping around, then it would certainly help not to have to qualify for that stress test. You know, I know a lot of people that were worried about having to renew their mortgage, and looking at that, you know, maybe somebody would be priced out of the home that they actually own and live in. So that would be a good thing as well. If they've been successfully making their payments, I don't see the point in stress testing them. It's like they're already able to service the debt. The other thing that they want to do is to adjust make it more flexible, at least if they're going to stress test heavier on the people that have higher risk in their terms and conditions versus people who are just taking on like a normal condo purchase that's well within their means, and that they would qualify for without the stress test of the 2% extra. So that's where they're at on that. I agree with both of those. You know, apparently BC lost an estimated $500 million in economic activity since they put in this stress test in 2018. So I get it. I do agree with them wanting not to help people who can't afford buy get into something that might get them into trouble down the road. But I also feel like a lot of people got mortgages before 2018 that probably over mortgaged anyways, and it's kind of what's the point? At least young people could afford something if they're not going to let the market correct as it should, and they're going to keep, you know, putting out these first-time home buyer programs. Why would you put out those programs and then not make it accessible to them through financing? I don't know. Something needs to change, but that's what the BC housing sector is urging the next government to do. Something needs to be done. So that is that. We will see what happens with the election. I have no idea who's going to win. I know a lot of people don't want Trudeau back in there, obviously. Or maybe you love him. I don't know. I'm not into politics that heavily. I think they all have their flaws. just choosing the lesser flawed one. But anyways, that's going to be let's wait and see what happens. That's also kind of the state of interest rates. It's like, let's see what happens after the election kind of vibe going on. I have been hearing, though, that they may be lowering them. I don't know. My worry is when I hear that, instead of bringing them up when they should likely come up, it's to keep lowering them to keep the party going and to make money accessible to people, right? And when you're lowering interest rates, that helps the economy get a little fire under its feet because money is cheaper and it pushes prices up again. So if they do that, I feel like perhaps, it might carry out the pricing for a little bit longer, but ultimately what happens when you cannot lower the interest rates any lower? What happens then, right? Because that's where a lot of places have gone before, and I don't know. I don't really think that's a healthy place to be, but we'll see what happens, right? If you're looking to buy and you don't want to wait and you're buying your principal residence, then, it could be a good time to buy in 2020. We'll see. Do I think you should be buying investment properties in 2020? No, not really, but that's my own personal opinion. So in other news, other than real estate, which interests me a lot, I am not an economist, and I'm not going to speak volumes of this stuff, but I've been watching the news very closely these past couple weeks, and I hope you have too. There has been a lot of hullabaloo about the climate change girl, Greta Thunberg, or I can't say her name, it's Swedish. Lots of kids around here locally missed school to go protest, and so there's been a big, to-do about that, about climate change, and we're being told by a 16-year-old, how dare we? But anyways, I don't hold popular views on climate change. I'm not beating that drum. I think there's lots of research that people could read into, and, it's such a heated topic. But so there's climate change girl, and then there's Trump impeachment, which also it's like he's almost at the end of his term, and it's like, really, we have bigger fish to fry. But that's what people want to put their attention into. I feel like we're being distracted by bigger things that are going on, and most people are effectively distracted by this. They see these things, the climate change protests, and all these kind of events that are exciting, but really behind the scenes, if you pay attention, you would have seen that the Fed has, I guess you'd call it a bailout in the repo market. They printed like hundreds of billions of dollars. I think JP Morgan was the one that they really bailed out, but I don't know the depth of it. It's not something that's in my wheelhouse of expertise, but it is something worth reading up on, because this happened kind of alongside of all these silly protests and things like that, and that's a big problem as well. That shows instability in a lot of the big banks in America, and our housing market, if anything, is tied to the United States quite strongly, and their retail market and housing markets are not doing well either. So yes, the issues in the repo market. People are calling it a liquidity bubble. I'm also hearing things about the index funds being in a bubble state as well, which, looking at it, I could kind of see it. I'm not an expert on index funds, but when I'm looking where I want to personally put my money, I am a little bit concerned about certain details in index funds, for sure. Retail stores are not doing well either. Record low sales are happening in the retail sector. Forever 21 filed Chapter 11, which, if you know it, it's that crappy clothing chain that sells like garbage clothes that end up in landfills in like a month. Yeah, so they filed Chapter 11. Apparently they're not paying their rents on their buildings, and they've got like 30,000 employees. They're huge. They're a huge company of fast fashion, but yeah, they're consolidating their debt and restructuring, and who knows what will happen, but not a good sign, I would say. Macy's also apparently is going out as well. The other thing that's been interesting is that IPOs in the tech sector, like, new tech startups and all that kind of stuff, they are not doing well when they come to market. Apparently they're selling okay, but then they're spiking and then crashing really fast, and that's kind of kind of bizarre. Apparently it's sending San Francisco into a weird state in their housing market because so much of that expensive housing has been bought by people working in the tech sector who were making really great incomes, but apparently it's wreaking havoc in that industry. So that's kind of interesting that, people seem to have lost faith in the tech IPOs. The main one that people are talking about is Peloton, that exercise bike that's like $3,000 basically, with a huge iPad glued to it, so you can do like spin classes or something for, you pay $19.95 for their app. If you buy a $3,000 exercise bike and the company collapses and there's no support for it, you kind of get what you pay for. Like, who would spend that much on a spin bike? Anyways, so yeah, that company's not doing well. That's kind of a weird thing going on there. I'm just making sure I'm touching on everything in my notes that's been going on. Zero interest rates are happening in other countries that are, there's a lot of news about that. I really hope that doesn't happen here, but I don't know. I'm not an expert in that state. And the other thing that people are very concerned about right now is a debt bubble. And this all relates to the US economy, our economy, everything. If the US does bad, people stop spending money in other sectors, and then it slowly trickles down to the housing market, which I exist within. And the debt servicing bubble is basically just, everybody who have taken on huge mortgages, then have, basically paid somebody huge money for the home that they got, 5 years ago, but like say 200 grand cheaper, they're going out and buying cars and buying luxury items. Basically everything is on debt. So debt is at an all-time high. And essentially you're in the kind of crux of how can we raise interest rates to help the economy kind of recover, or become more balanced at least. How can you raise interest rates when, if you do so, it will basically force people to sell their homes, go through bankruptcy, that kind of stuff. So if there's that many people that would be affected dramatically by slight interest rate increases, we're kind of like, we have our hands tied. And so at that point, it's like, who knows how long that will go on for. I know many people who are encumbered by massive amounts of debt. And if one of the spouses lost a job, they'd be up shit creek. I know that's not me. I don't have any debt except for my very modest mortgage. I know a lot of you out there don't have consumer debt either, but that is not the case for most people. And it's pretty scary that people have become so comfortable with mass amounts of debt. I guess more comfortable than any other time in history. So that's going to be kind of an interesting thing in these coming years. And as I say, it's not overnight, but the housing market, I think, once one market goes, I think the other ones will follow, because everything is kind of built on a foundation of sand. So, as they say, when the tide comes in, we'll see what will happen. Probably not good. Not good. But anyways, that is the market in general. That's what I've been paying attention to in these past couple weeks. I do hope you go and Google some of those things if you haven't been hearing about them in the news. Hopefully they have been getting through to you in the news, because they are more important than Greta Thunberg and climate protests. Sorry if you went to them. It's none of my business, but I'm just not beating that drum. In other news, I finished my trailer. Yeah, it's done. I posted my video last time when I was sitting there with, cleaning rags around, and it was just totally torn apart. Yeah, it's done now. So I finish what I start. That's right. So I'll cut to just a little snippet to show you what I did with it. And if you're interested, I don't know. I'm interested in it. And yeah, I hope everything is treating you well so far in this fall season. And if you need any help or advice with real estate, feel free to get in touch. I did add a form on my website under the Work With Me section. It says Ask Alice, and basically I just put in a form that you can type in a question, and you can optionally put in your email or not. I prefer basically, it's an opportunity if you want to ask a question and you don't want to have to provide your name or personal details or anything like that. You just want unbiased, anonymous advice. That's kind of what I'm going for. It's totally brand new, and I'm trying to figure out how to make it work just so that I can help people, answer questions about, say, their market or what's happening, with their financial situation, if they're trying to buy, or just anything like that, in a way that I can answer it without knowing who you are. Because, basically with the real estate council and the rules that changed, I have to provide a disclosure if I'm providing any real estate services. If I know anything about you, I have to treat you either as a client or an unrepresented party. So that makes it tricky to help people and give advice. But I just thought perhaps if there was a way for you to ask a question that you'd like answered, but you don't want to have to worry about me trying to follow up with you and sell something to you. Not that I would do that. Just to be anonymous, just to have an answer to your question without the worry of being hounded by a salesperson. That's why I provided it. In one way, it's selfless because I don't know who you are. I don't want to know who you are because that would get me in trouble. But, just so that you could perhaps have an answer, whereas maybe you wouldn't ask because you'd be afraid of being sold to. So selfless in that sense, selfish if, perhaps if you like the advice and down the road you decide to either refer me or use me as your realtor, then that would be great, right? It's kind of as much service as I can provide to you. One hand kind of washes the other in that sense. So that's on my website. If it gets taken down, it's because I got in trouble for trying to do something again. Hopefully not. But yeah, it's there. Feel free, and I will do my best to answer any questions people have and help where I can, because that's what I like doing. I like helping people. So yeah, that's it for me. And yeah, if you hear anything interesting, shoot me an email. I'm always interested in the economy and what's going on. And I wish I could be in more detail about certain things that's happening, like the repo market and all those kind of things, but it's not in my professional wheelhouse, and I don't want to provide any information that I don't know the details of, the nitty-gritty. I have a general understanding of these things, but I don't want to provide my personal insight because I feel like it's important stuff, and it's probably better to read news articles that relate to that from people who are economists who have been trained professionally. I know I pay attention from my own investment purposes, and as I'm sure you do too. But yeah, it's just an interesting conversation to have and to talk about and see if other people are noticing these things as well. So anyways, that's all I got for this week. Have a great week. Hopefully it gets a little bit warmer, and I will talk to you next time. And yeah, take care and stay warm.